Music Not Diving is brought to you by Acid Nation, formerly AC55ID.com. Acid Nation is the new version of SOS, which is basically the same with a few little tweaks. It's now completely free to use. It is the same fastest growing electronic music marketplace. Whether you're buying music, selling music, or listening to music, this is the place for you. So 1 cent per stream, the mythical 1 cent per stream, is reality over on Acid Nation. If you're doing vinyl as a label, well, they've got their own pressing plant, so they can absolutely help you with that, and they can fulfill vinyl orders on demand, which is also pretty incredible. It is great for podcasters because they pay podcasters 1 cent per stream too. So if you're listening to this podcast over on there, well then, thanks for your contribution. They're also supporting the show directly, of course, which is why I'm doing this promo. So, it's just all round an awesome service, basically. We actually use them for Hot Flush recordings. So I'm not just saying that. It is absolutely awesome. So head over to acidnation.com to check them out.
This is Music Not Diving with Scuba.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, it is the end of July. I'm heading off on holiday next week for a few weeks. We're going to take August off, but don't worry, we've got some stuff lined up and ready to go for those few weeks. In the meantime, though, we have a proper episode for you. On the show this week, it's Slam. Actually, it's half of Slam. Stuart from Slam is joining me to talk about techno, talk about their new album on Soma Records, the history of Soma Records and Slam too. And also, we get into some really interesting stuff about the scene in Glasgow, all the way back to the Acid House scene in Glasgow, but also the scene right now, what it's like to go out in Scotland. We haven't really covered that much at all on the show previously. So this is a really interesting one. Slam are absolute legends of techno, and Scottish techno in particular. Stuart's a great guy, and we have a really interesting conversation here about lots of the issues that we've talked about previously on the show, but with a slightly different flavour. So yeah, you're going to enjoy this one, honestly. It's good. Just before we get into it, a reminder that you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/ScubaOfficial. There are 2 very reasonably priced tiers over there, the more expensive of which gets you all of the music that we release on Hot Flush and affiliated labels. If you don't want to do that, completely understand, hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, head over to wherever you listen to audio only podcasts and subscribe to us there too. That would be great. And all of that good stuff. So without further delay, let's get on the phone with Stuart from Slam.
Brought to you by acidnation.com.
Stuart, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm very well, thank you. What's going on?
Oh, just this and that. Just had the album, came out, Dark Channel. Busy with events, just busy with doing what we do, really, just getting on with things.
Yeah, I've been reading a bit about what you've been going on recently. There's a BBC story about your 35th anniversary, and it makes it sound like you're playing at the Arches. Did you play at the Arches? Isn't the Arches shut?
We did. We went back there. We hadn't done the club for like 5 or 6 years, so we had no
I thought it was shut.
appetite.
I thought the Arches was shut.
It was, but it opened under another new management, and they had ran for a season, and they were booking a lot of kind of the stuff the kids love these days.
Say no more.
And we were just, the jury's out with that.
Do you mean hard techno? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, that and amongst other things. Like, I've never really hated on any kind of musical style. Okay. Just to understand.
Until now.
Until today. Just to put you in the picture, I'm not, I kind of always we've kind of always just followed our path naturally and tried to kind of ignore what was going on in other genres and stuff. You'll know because you've been around for a little bit as well. I think back in the day, genres coexisted really well. Like one person could be into trance, the other person could be into techno, someone could be into house. And there just everyone within the ecosystem seemed to find their own little place where they sat. I think it's only recently now that music has there's definitely a kind of all or nothing kind of approach to things. People will jump on something. It's like, oh, look at that. So what you find less of is you find less little tribes, and you find more people just gravitating towards whatever's fashionable or whatever. But I guess what I'm trying to say was that music's always been there, you know, GABA and, you know, hard trance, but it's just something that we've never got involved in, really, just purely because we didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. You know?
So, but I mean, it's like, you know, but back then it's no different to now. But in terms of the arches, we just kind of thought, let's go back, let's try this out. We didn't know what the appetite was for it for a start. You know, when you've not done anything for 5 years, you know, in a certain venue or whatever, you kind of think to yourself, well, how are people going to resonate with that? How's that going to fly? Or, you know, when we did it, we did like multi-room pressure nights, and we brought up people like Jeff Mills and, you know, had some housey guys from Chicago, like a whole bunch of stuff went on in there. So us doing it on our own, like as a kind of all night open to close thing was a bit of a punt, but you know, the first one sold out in 20 minutes or something. And then, so we've done another 2 since then, but I kind of forgot how amazing that space is and how a venue can have its own personality to make people behave in a certain way or react to certain tunes at a certain point of the night. Because I remember there's this, I think it's Domino Carl Craig remix. I don't know if you remember it. It's like a sort of basic channel thing, and then a big sort of kick and hack came in. And then I used to play that sort of in the warm up. And then there was the bit where the kick and hack came in, and people just lost their went mental, and they reacted in exactly the same way. But I think what was amazing about those parties was that there was like a whole bunch of older clubbers came, but there's also like a bunch of younger people come as well because they wanted to see what that vibe was like. I mean, those nights have become sort of legendary, so they wanted to get, you know, they wanted to experience that firsthand as well.
Yeah, you're talking about Pressure in particular.
Yeah.
How long did Pressure go for?
Oh, God. I mean, we started doing the Friday nights in about 94 till about 99, I think. And then it went till 2015.
Yeah,
so a good 15, 16 years.
Crazy. I think I played once or something, maybe twice.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, I love that venue too, to be honest.
It's really special.
Yeah, it was like a proper rave venue. It's actually, I mean, there's a few in London, like the venues that used to be the old King's Cross. There was a bunch of venues that was under the arches, so kind of similar kind of a vibe. But I mean, obviously Glasgow is something, you know, it's something a little bit different. And actually, I haven't talked about Glasgow at all on the show. So this is kind of a good thing to get. It's a good place to start, actually. So, I mean, it is pretty special, but it's very different to the rest of the UK, partly because of the relatively early closing time, which gives the vibes, gives the nights a slightly different kind of flavour, I suppose. I don't know. How do you differentiate the kind of long-term music scene in Glasgow with the rest of the UK, maybe, and, you know, other places?
Well, I mean, the stock closing times 3 a.m. However, they gave like venues like the Arches and the Sub Club, like Pressure was like every month. So I think, you know, a good few of those we had 5 a.m. licenses for those. Which was kind of right about the right time for it to finish, because Glaswegians are kind of full on, you know? So they don't pace themselves. It's not like Berlin, you know. If I walk up to Berghain and people coming out of Berghain at like 2 in the afternoon, I look at them as if they're kids coming back from the Christmas shopping or something. Right, exactly. You know, people are really composed, you know. So and in Glasgow, I think that's the beautiful thing about Glasgow. People just go for it from the word go. And I think we managed, the 5 a.m. was just about the right time for, you know, that we didn't get a lot of drop off, or people, because people weren't coming and going throughout the night. Most of the time people would come at the beginning and then they would stay for the duration.
Yeah, I mean, so is there a difference in vibe, do you think? Like, to what extent does Glasgow have its own thing, like, compared to London and Manchester? And
I think it definitely has an energy, and a lot of DJs have said so. For me, I think there's just, I know what it is, a kind of raw energy in Glasgow, that you don't get. People really express themselves. They're really open to expressing themselves, which if you're a DJ and you drop a tune, or that's really rewarding to see people just go absolutely nuts. I think Glaswegians they're completely up for the party, and they express themselves without thinking about it too much, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen it a few times. I think particularly it's been most obvious to me in sub clubs sometimes, when the kind of hitting of the ceiling and that sort of thing. It's just like, it's very obvious. I know.
Yeah, it is. That's another venue that has a really special vibe, and we're lucky enough to play there very regularly, like with our RTM nights. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. It's still my favourite place to play. Sub club. Yeah, it's just Glasgow in general.
Speaking,
yeah. So it's still my favourite city.
Yeah, right. Is that where you're from originally? Did you grow up in Glasgow?
I grew up. I grew up in Cumbernauld, and then I moved north to a place called Milton Campsie, and then I moved into the West End of Glasgow when I was pretty young. So like when I'd probably have moved into 17, 18, I've lived in Glasgow. Like, so all of my adult life, right. I've been living in the city of Glasgow.
Awesome.
And been going to clubs for that long as well.
Yeah, right. Well, I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you about the Acid House era and all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, let's just talk about the new record. Dark Channel came out recently, a couple months ago, something like that. Yeah. It's very techno. It's very much a dance floor record, right? It's unambiguously a techno record, which is great. Yeah. Tell me about it. Tell me a little bit about it. What number album is this for you? You must be.
I think it's up. I can't remember. I just can't. I just don't know. One thing that, like, when you look back at there's such a pressure to release a lot of music, but subsequently that's not why we make music. We make music. Generally, we make music to play in our sets because, in the week I'll go digging for music, and if I don't find it, I'll make it. If that makes sense. Absolutely. Whether that's like an edit of someone else's track, or whether that's like a completely new track, it depends. So those kind of find their way into our sets. So Dark Channel was just me and Ord experimenting, like basically trying to pare down what we would normally do, rather than, we'll plug this and we'll plug that in. We worked with the modular, we worked with the 909, basically the live setup, and we just jammed, and the tracks came together really quickly, and we were like, wait a minute, if we got another 3 or 4 tracks, this could be an LP. But then the thinking behind it is that it's a celebration of the dance floor. Because in this moment in time, I've never known a more fractious time, a more divided time. And I think that connection that people have on the dance floor, that communal connection that people have on the dance floor, is really, really unique in a time of division,
Absolutely.
So, we'd sort of thought, like, okay, maybe we'll put some ambient tracks or some break tracks. And we're like, no, not really. We've never done that before. We've never done an album which doesn't tell, which isn't a bit cross-genre, or doesn't, there isn't kind of ambient tracks or down-tempo tracks or, other moments. So we've never done a full-on club album. I think the closest we got to was the snapshot shots back at, after Positive Education, but we haven't, we haven't done that. So that in itself is a bit of a challenge, to sort of tell a story within a kind of more restricted, rigid framework. And I think we kind of succeeded to do that. You know, when you're in the studio, you bake a bunch of tracks that they belong to that project, and I think that the tracks on Dark Channel definitely do belong as a body of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent the morning basically listening to a ton of stuff from your catalogue. I'd never heard the Athenaeum LP, Athenaeum 101.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. I mean, it really is. Like, I mean, I love the new record too, but I mean, I was thinking, I was like, I can't believe I hadn't heard this before. It's great. 21 tracks, like a lot of them are quite short, but there's all kinds of different stuff in there, super atmospheric stuff, some ambient, like straightforward ambient stuff, and, you know, some more beaty stuff too. It's honestly genuinely brilliant. Like, I can't believe that passed me by at the time, because, yeah, it's great, really.
Well, yeah, with that, all the numbers on the artwork on the back of the sleeve, they're the times in which the new track changes. So we started with one idea and then borrowed from that idea, built on that, created another idea out of that idea, right, and so on and so forth. And
really, so you made them in sequence, basically?
In sequence,
right.
Completely in sequence.
Wow.
So one track was like, it started, and then we borrowed bits of that. Some of that would go on into the next track. And the idea was to make something that just had like, well, it's 101 BPM. So we wanted to do something, we wanted to slow everything right down and kind of tell a bit of a story with that. And also we didn't want to sell, there's a bit of a kickback about releasing an album and then somebody just going, yeah, I'll have that track,
right,
or I'll have that track, and then they don't listen to the rest of the album. We kind of wanted to force people to sort of like listen to the album in its entirety, and rather than sort of cherry pick certain pieces or certain tracks. Well, you know, I'll have that one or have that one, you know. So that was the vibe behind that. It's actually it still is the favourite album, because
it's great, honestly, really, really good. Like, seriously.
Yeah, I think the things that you do, you exercise quickly, are generally the things that you don't mind going back and listen to, because you've not had any trauma or kind of angst kind of creating them, or it's been somewhat more effortlessly achieved than, I think the things that you struggle to compose are much harder to retrospectively look back on fondly.
Yeah, it's hard to get distance sometimes. Yeah, I absolutely know the feeling. Yeah, when you're just going around in circles with something and completely overthinking it, that's absolutely happened to me before. And yeah, like you say, like sometimes it's the ones that just click and just fall into place. Often those are the ones that end up working the best, right?
Yeah, I think all the records that we've made that have become semi popular or big records, if for want of a better term, those have all happened quite instantaneously. They've not been deliberated or laboured on. Yeah, the ideas come together and we're like, whoa, that sounds amazing. Let's put that aside, and then we can work on it later. I mean, that's all we have to do now is we just do lots of loops. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about using the modular, because that, I suppose, lends itself to that kind of approach, right? Because you make a patch and it's difficult to replicate it. What you have to do is record little patches. I mean, usually percussive elements with the mod, and then you have to sanitize it somehow, because what you think you're doing at the time might sound amazing to your ear, and sort of often does sound quite nice in a live setup. But then when you listen back to it and you want to commit that to, I was going to say vinyl, but yeah, in this case vinyl, then you kind of go, right, we need to sort of try and take the best bits of that and kind of piece them together so that it makes sonic sense and it's not just like a wild jam that, I don't know, there's something that in me that if I'm making techno that it needs to be regimented in a way. Right. Yeah, okay. I know what you mean. It needs to be, within a certain
Yeah, there's got to be
framework.
some kind of constraints, right? I feel like if
Yeah,
you don't have
yeah.
those constraints, it can very easily just kind of meander, and like those kinds of records. I mean, some people are able to do that really well. I'm not at all, and I think like generally speaking, like every genre, I tend to think has a set of rules. Basically, there is a set of things that it has to do, or at least be aware of. The music's got to be aware of these things, and techno, I think, absolutely has that totally. And yeah, you're right. The kind of the propensity for the sort of endless changing jam can quite easily get away from what it should be, right?
I think it would just end up sounding like a progressive rock record or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Yes, exactly right. So did you say you're doing the drums on the 909 for most of these tracks?
Yeah, 909 and the R8. But then we would, sometimes the that's good for the jam, but then we go back and replace the sounds. If we weren't happy with the sounds, we would definitely go back and reprogram some of the patterns back in, because sometimes the sounds on particularly the R8 don't sonically sit that well. They're a bit thin and a bit tinny, and no amount of processing is going to make them sound better.
Yeah, sure. That's the thing with the original 909. It just seems to sit in the mix.
Oh, it's great.
I don't really know how
great.
that happens. It's actually the same with the 101. If you put either of those two instruments on a record, they just sit in the mix, don't they? They just kind of meld into it. It's crazy.
Perfect. I mean, the thing is, like, I know I've seen Jeff Mills use it like a gazillion times in his sets, and I'm just like, the punch off that drum machine, even compared to like a record that's mastered, but just the way that cuts through the system.
Yeah, it doesn't get old, does it, at all? It's like...
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not.
Crazy good. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned that this is the most dance floor album, in terms of albums anyway, that you guys have done. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was intentionally so. I mean, it was... partly it's just us having a bit of a pop at people's attention spans as well, because right now no one seems to have any attention span. It seems to be like everybody just wants stuff direct. You kind of wonder to yourself, by us putting an ambient track on there, who's going to pay attention to that or kind of listen to that? Let's just, and with the album concept being a homage to the dance floor of that kind of sacred place and in a world of division, then wouldn't have made any sense not to just keep it straight up dance, straight up club, peak time stuff.
Absolutely. Talk a bit more about this division thing. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I mean, in particular, what are the issues which you're kind of thinking of there?
Well, I've always been quite liberal, and sometimes I just feel that nobody's meeting in the middle to have a conversation. I think you can never solve issues by being completely polarized. I think if somebody is racist or sexist or whatever, we have to really be asking the questions, why do they feel like that, but we're in a time just now where those questions aren't being asked. People are either kind of this way or that way, so we're really, really polarized. And I think that's a dangerous time. That's a dangerous time when people are not coming in the middle and having conversation. I think that is definitely something that isn't good for society as a whole.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it does feel like there is this is like something which has kind of been developing over, I guess, at least 10 years now, right? And
for sure,
it does seem to have does seem to be getting worse. Like certain things will happen, you think, oh, maybe there's going to be a bit of a lull in this now, but it does seem to have just, and obviously with the change of presidency in America just has made it quite a bit worse. Like, what's it like in Glasgow in particular, and I suppose in Scotland, but in Glasgow in particular, because obviously there's there's a very long running issue in the city which manifests itself
about sectarianism.
Yeah, and I guess it sort of manifests itself in the football.
I've always just never really understood it.
Yeah.
I've always been it's always baffled me why someone would get upset about something that happened 300 years ago or 200 years ago, or, you know, I mean, I've got like a kind of two system, like you're either decent or you're not decent, but that doesn't really matter where you're from or what you're doing or whatever. You know, I guess it's like, other people don't have that. You know, if you add in the football aspect to it as well, it's always baffled me. I've never really understood why people would and why it persists now. Yeah, you know, maybe back when I was a kid, you might have thought that people would have kind of grown out of that now, you know. And I think that has happened to a certain extent, but I think it could, you know, it baffles me how it's still quite rife, and you know, and I don't understand. As I said, I don't understand it, and you know, it kind of baffles me. You know, the whole acid house thing. If we're going to put that into the mix, that kind of was about people coming together. That was a really special time because you had people coming together from all different walks of life, and you know, socializing. You know, Catholic, Protestant, whatever. You know, and everybody was accepted for that small period of time. But maybe that's not a human instinct per se. Maybe the human instinct is to be territorial and tribal. You know, certainly that's not something that I kind of understand or follow.
Absolutely. We'll definitely come back to the acid house thing. That was something I had written down, in particular the football thing, because I've talked about this particular issue quite a bit on the show previously, so we'll come back to that. I mean, the reason that sort of like pricked up my ears when you started talking about division is that obviously Glasgow and the sectarian stuff in Glasgow has a lot of parallels to Northern Ireland. And the Northern Ireland thing is, my family are Irish, and that whole thing has been, I guess, sort of, to some extent resurrected. I suppose the issues have been resurrected in a music sense by the Kneecap guys. And obviously they're not sectarian themselves, but they're, you know, they're some of their imagery and obviously the way they present themselves, and just the fact that they are so nakedly political has,
which I think is amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what I was
like,
going to ask you. Yeah. So what's your?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like, you know, my awakening came when I was like 10 years old. You know, Sex Pistols, Clash, and this angry political music of the time, which, you know, we can draw many parallels between now and then, and you know, in terms of economy and kind of distribution of wealth, etc. You know, and in general, kind of people not being, you know, happy in their own environment, you know. And I think I think it's time for this, because it's been a long time when people have been saying, "Oh, don't mix politics with music." And I think you should absolutely. I think that music is the perfect platform to bring that to people's consciousness, and whether you want to, you know, get involved in that or not, that's kind of up to you. But I think it's, you know, I'm not really, I mean, I couldn't tell you one Kneecap track. I couldn't tell you, you know, what they sounded like, but it's in terms of them kind of using that platform, you know, as a political voice. I think we need more of that in music at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's definitely space for it, and it's been conspicuous by its absence for quite a long time. You know, people just there are kind of narrow things that people will speak up about, but they're usually things which are already kind of being baked into what's happening in wider society. So, for example, you know, the LGBTQ thing, which has, you know, historically been a really important issue, but that is very much it's almost in the corporate sector now. Like every major corporation has a pride event. Like, you're not, as a musician, you're not taking any sort of a risk by saying I stand up for LGBT rights. Do you know what I mean? You're just not. But there are other areas of politics which definitely are still risky. I mean, as the Kneecap guys have discovered.
I think you realise kind of what you're going up against is not just the government, but it's the establishment, you know. Yeah. And it's like, you know, to be anti-establishment has always been dangerous. I mean, it happened with the Rolling Stones in the 60s. It happened with the Pistols, and you know, if you poke the bear, shake the cage of the establishment, you're going to get kickback from that, you know. And I think we've seen that with Kneecap, seen it with Bob Dylan, we've seen it, you know, we've seen people getting, you know, persecuted for just speaking their mind, and you know, or speaking up for, you know, a cause which they believe in, which a lot of other people believe in, by the way, you know. Right. It's you know, if you take someone like, let's not go down the Gaza route, but you know what's happening there is tragic, you know, and
sure.
these things need to be spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely. When people say, you know, you mentioned a lot of people say music shouldn't be political, or techno isn't political, or dance music isn't political.
Well, I think techno is political.
Yeah, okay, you know? So go on, expand on that.
Well, I think it's political because it brings people together, and that shouldn't necessarily be together. You know, right. It opens that, it bringing people together in itself is a political statement, because you know the main objective is to kind of separate people. I think, you know, it sounds a bit tinfoil hat conspiratorial, but it's not. Yeah. It's not. It's kind of. You know, from where, if you look at Berlin's techno history, it was kind of set up in you know, in East Berlin. Tresor, all the good clubs back then were in the East, you know, and they were kind of, some of them illegal. Mm-hmm. In the UK, certainly you had the whole, you know, rave scene, which was illegal. You know, for at the beginning, so those are the building blocks and the roots of techno, and just by its attitude, it's not kind of, you know, it can be quite subversive music, you know, sonically, you know, and I think it's political for the reasons that it brings people together, and you know, and that's a good thing, and I think. You know, establishment doesn't like that either, you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when people say it isn't political or it shouldn't be political, they're thinking about party politics, right? And it's not party political at all. That's not the nature of the political dimension of techno or dance music or whatever. It's much more broad than that, and like you say, it's in the business of casting aside those forces which, as you say, push people apart. Right, which in itself, is, as you said, yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a political act, isn't it? And I think the danger is when people try and co-opt it in quite narrow political, in quite a narrow political direction. So someone will say, you can't, if you don't agree with this one thing, then you don't belong in techno. And that to me is a bit problematic, you know. And obviously there are certain things which, you know, which
I think it's such a,
maybe should they go on, sorry.
I think it's such a broad church now, techno. It's like there's so many different factions and within, you know, that people would say, oh yeah, that's techno, there's melodic techno, there's kind of hard techno.
I mean, the term has become slightly, yeah.
So I mean, part of my appeal for techno was that people didn't like it, you know. When I started playing techno back in the 90s, people were like, "You're playing techno." He plays techno. You know, it was a bit of a dirty word, you know. Yeah. But I liked that. I kind of liked the fact that not everybody, you know, would resonate with it. And the sort of young kid of a punk rocker kind of liked that element. That it would upset some people, or not everybody. It wouldn't, you know, be for everybody. I mean, I remember hearing when I was a kid, it was, you know, I'd hear disco on the radio and I'd hear punk, and somehow, you know, when I heard techno, it gave me a feeling of both of those genres kind of fusing together somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. So how old were you when you first got into this stuff? How old were you when you first started thinking about music as a serious thing to do?
When I got into like punk, or when I got into dance music.
I meant, yeah. Well, actually, the question was about when you felt like music was something you wanted to do seriously. But let's go back further than that. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, it was for me. It was you never really join these dots until you kind of sort of look back on it. You kind of everything just kind of happens quite naturally. But I remember I was the guy, when I was a kid, I was the guy trying to get people into like a new band, or I was trying to I'd be the guy playing records at a party or whatever, so I was like, for me, it was never about a career, and me, like, my career or whatever. It was for me when I started DJing, it was never really, I never really thought about it.
I don't think DJing even really existed as a career, did it then? I mean, in terms of the way people thought about it,
But, I guess when I was like 17, 18 and I started going to clubs that were kind of like soul, hip hop, kind of disco, like a whole mixture of stuff.
Yeah.
The DJ was actually quite hard to find in the club. You couldn't really find, you're like, where's this music coming from? It wasn't like you were going to see a band, you would kind of like look around the venue and go, oh, that's the guy playing the music there. And I'd just be the guy standing next to the booth, kind of looking and going, what's he doing? What's this? But as you said, that wasn't really a kind of fashionable thing to do at the time. Nobody really gave a shit about the DJ, like they would dance to the music, but they would never really go, where's that coming from? Or that's that guy, that only happened kind of when the whole acid house thing kind of kicked in. People start like, the raves, people like Carl Cox or whatever, they were like, oh, that's a superstar DJ. Or when people started seeing people's names on a flyer, like if you went to the WAG club, which I did in London, they very rarely put the DJ's names on the flyer, Yeah, so it was like,
it would be like the style of music, wouldn't it? It would be like, you're going to hear this.
Funk, rare groove, like blah, blah, blah. So I would just stand there and go, what's this guy up to? And then I started to buy the records. I started to go around secondhand stores and kind of record shops. And I just acquired a whole bunch of records. And then I met Ord, who'd sort of been doing the same. He'd been down in Sheffield, and he'd be going to clubs like Lead Mill and stuff down there. And then we kind of, we worked to the same bar, and we both made tapes for the bar. And then we were like, whose tapes this is, and I was like, similar music on there. So we kind of got together as a DJ duo from that, really. It's just from a kind of...
What year are we in, roughly?
We're in about 1986.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Sounds like a long time ago.
I mean, it is quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what were on these tapes? What were you mostly playing?
Well, anything from Mantronics to kind of sort of funk stuff to, early hip hop stuff, early house stuff, just a whole bunch of, quite eclectic back then. Nobody was really mixing one style over another. But dance music wasn't something that people in general got that invested in unless they were going to a club, they would hear it. No one would, people weren't really collecting dance records unless you were a DJ. So I guess it was unusual to hear someone else with that musical selection.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've had a bunch of conversations with people who are similar sort of vintage to you, and who are getting into music, I guess, in the years before Acid House, and it really sounds like it was quite a fun time, quite a fun period. Like, there's lots of great music coming out, lots of different things happening which overlapped with each other and sort of created, I suppose, the conditions to some extent for the Acid House thing to happen and blow up. But like, it really does sound kind of great, honestly, musically.
I mean,
anyway.
I think clubs were like a sanctuary in those days, where you went there because like a lot of the other clubs, you might get beaten up in.
Right, yeah.
So there's a kind of like, clubs were quite, could be called like discotheques or whatever, were quite dangerous places. There were certain clubs in the city centre that you felt safe in because people dressed a certain way. They were different to the rest of the population. They weren't going there for a fight, basically.
Right. Okay.
that sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of, that's really the kind of environment we were in back then,
Yeah, absolutely.
So that had an important part of where people went and where people hung out in the
So
city.
what were the key places then in Glasgow previous to that?
Well, believe it or not, the Sub Club.
Really? Well, how long has that been open for then?
Well, I mean, the night was called the Sub Club,
Right.
and it was and the venue was called Lucifer's.
Oh, okay.
But then they moved around a lot. They moved to a place called Mardi Gras, and then they moved to somewhere else. There was a place called Maestro's, which was like a kind of, it had a sort of trans element to it. So like, a lot of people dressing up and, that was kind of cool as well. There's loads of little places. A place called Splash One, which was like an indie club, which we used to go to as well, which was Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream.
Right. Okay. So when Acid House hit, what was it? What was the Glasgow version like?
Well, we started in, I think it was August 1988.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd been buying the records previously to that. House music wasn't a cool thing,
Sure.
It's like you would hear house music in clubs that you wouldn't go to,
Yep.
But when we started, it was right at the time when the whole media hype was kicking off, and it was just the first week I think we had like 100 people in, and the next week we were turning 100 people away.
Really?
So it was
Wow.
just crazy. So I mean, it was like I think we were in a venue which is now a strip club, Diamond something, I can't remember what it's called, but
So
it
is
was a
this
club called
sorry to interrupt you, but is this the Black Market night that you're talking about?
Well, the Black Market was before that.
Ah, okay.
Black Market was before that. That was kind of more a mixed bag, kind of, some house, some, real groove, etc. But as we collected more house, we kind of, the slam at Simpan Alley was the first time that we had sort of said this is an acid house night.
Okay.
We'd never really, before that, we'd never kind of been that obvious to mention what kind of music even we would play. But with that one, we kind of, that was the first one that we came out and said, this is acid house. And, like all of these things from memory, you look back and you think, I must have been doing that for 6 months. But I think we only did it for 3 months there. And then we moved on to other things. We started to do events at the Tramway Theatre. We were doing nights in the Sub Club. I think we were DJing 4 or 5 nights a week, and then we were doing other events as well.
So there was kind of
It was quite a quick trajectory.
So
of
there was serious
kind of-
appetite for it then in the city.
Oh yeah,
People were
completely.
ready to go, I guess.
I mean, it was just like, it's almost like you can remember the time before Acid House and after, because it's like someone switched the switch on and it just went mental, and everybody was consumed in it.
Right.
It was like a thing that sucked people in from all different walks of life. I mean, Tin Pan Alley itself in a venue had a kind of discotheque upstairs from people with curly mullets, like upstairs, and they'd wander down and go, what the, and it'd be all strobe labs, and they're like, what the fuck is this place all about? And then you'd see them down there, like they'd had their haircut, and
Couple
like,
weeks later, right?
Within
Okay.
a couple of weeks later, and everything had changed, So it's just like crazy, like a movement. That's all I can say. I think it's the last movement I can remember as a proper cultural shift. You had like punk, and you had like the mods, and then Acid House came, 10 years after punk. And then the next revolution wasn't a musical revolution, it was like a technological revolution. So it would be the internet. But before that, that to me, it really felt like a movement. It really felt like a lifestyle. People would go out, 5 nights a week.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, I suppose you talked a bit about before about the effect that it had on easing tensions, and in particular, I mean, you mentioned in a previous interview actually like that football fans stopped fighting with each other, and I suppose, I mean, like the kind of broader socioeconomic conditions here were that it had been basically bad for the whole of the 80s up to that point, across the country as well. I think Glasgow had it particularly bad, but there were certainly other places in the UK too which were really affected by deindustrialization and, you know, all the stuff that was going on. And I suppose when people talk about the politics of it, it's often it's and going back to this idea about the extent to which it was kind of party political. I suppose people, well, certainly my memory of this was, you know, I was too young to be going to the parties myself, but I certainly remember watching, for example, comedy shows in the 80s, and like bashing Maggie and bashing Victoria's was just such a big part of culture, generally speaking. And my kind of, you know, kid brain looking at this, you know, really, you know, being aware of Acid House in the press and that kind of stuff, it seemed to be an extension of that, at least to some extent, right?
I would say it was like a natural progression to that. I mean, like, I guess what you talk about is like the alternative comedy from, you know, Young Ones or, you know, that kind of thing.
Comic strip and all that.
I mean, and then you had like, you know, this is Thatcher years, which, you know, miners' strikes.
Yeah. I mean, 88 was just like peak Thatcher, wasn't it, basically?
Yeah,
like,
peak Thatcher. I mean, in many ways, you had this sort of juxtaposition of people like, you know, this is a time when the economy was starting to swing back round again. People, you know, there was that kind of very, you know, kind of yuppie sort of vibe happening as well at the same time. So you had all that
wine
kind of coming
bars,
into
that kind of thing.
Wine bars, yeah. Yeah. So you had that's the kind of climate we were in, quite chaotic, you know. And I think obviously something like Acid House slotted nicely into that chaos. It was something that was just, I think people at that point needed an outlet or something to get involved in, because life was pretty, unless you were like a guy in the city or you know, a banker or something, you weren't doing well financially. You know, you wanted, you know, life was a bit, for most young people, and had been fairly insipid for, you know, 10 years. And along came this thing, and, you know, the drugs were involved in that as well. That played a huge part in it. And I mean, it's fairly unique. I think, you know, when people talk about the 60s, before my time, by the way, before we go there, you know, subsequently I've kind of, I wouldn't say researched, but I've read a lot of books that, you know, document that era. And what we've learned from it is that the swing in London thing was partly just a media kind of creation that didn't really travel to, you know, it wasn't something that people were involved in per se themselves, unless you were like a mod or a rocker or something like that. It wasn't this swinging Austin Powers kind of.
That was like 3 streets in London, basically.
Carnaby Street,
for about 4 years.
You know, all this kind of popular dictation of the 60s kind of didn't really exist. And then the punk thing, you know, and then the you know, the Acid House thing was definitely kind of, that was, I mean, they even called it like the second Summer of Love. You know,
but it was actually what that 60s thing was supposed to be, right? It actually was widespread.
It was a manifestation of that, what it should have been. Yeah, because it was for everybody. It was egalitarian, you know, everybody could, everybody had a part in it, and you weren't judged for, you know, because of the nature of the drug and everything else, you know, for those couple of halcyon years where, you know, everybody was on a similar path. You know, that didn't last long, but you know, it was a wonderful sort of utopia, if you will, at that time.
Like I said, had conversations with various other people about this on the show, notably a guy called Gerald and also Richard. Richard Fearless, and you know, I've asked them directly about, you know, is the legend of, you know, the breaking down of social barriers, the like, you know, the social change that lots of people taking ecstasy, apparently, so goes the legend, led to. With regards to specifically talking about the sectarian stuff in Glasgow, was there a noticeable difference? Like, and you've already said it didn't last long, but like, you know, for that period,
I think it's well documented whether it's just in Glasgow or the rest of the country. I think football violence did go down, you know, at that time.
A lot, yeah, right. It seemed like whole of the... Sorry, go on, finish. Go on.
I've never really been a football guy. I've never really been that into football. I'm kind of, you know, for me, I mean, I wouldn't have known a Rangers fan from a Celtic fan or whatever, you know. So for me, it was just. But I've subsequently read about, you know, it's been well documented that football violence dropped significantly within that period. At that point, you know, there was no fighting on the terraces. You know, during Acid House, it was, you know, they would all go to the same parties and all that, and in London as well, and in Glasgow, you know.
Yeah, I mean, seemed. Go on, sorry.
Before that, it was pretty divided.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed to like have quite a big effect on the far right, generally speaking. Seems to just, you know, lose a lot of ground as a, you know, in that period, and perhaps as a result.
Well, that's circling back to why techno and you know, Acid House or whatever you want to call it is political, because it breaks down those barriers which extremists don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk a bit more about how things developed for you guys. So you're playing just all the time in this kind of amazingly great period. So how long did it last then? Up to about sort of 1991 sort of thing? The really good bit?
Yeah, we ended up kind of doing the Atlantis thing at the Sub Club with Harry. And I mean,
so just to clarify, this is still before Sub Club had their own venue?
No, it was called the Sub Club at that point.
Okay.
We'd done a massive event at the Tramway Theatre, which basically, as many people wanted to get into, you know, there was more people wanting to get into it that were in the venue. And I went off to Ibiza the next day, and then just thought, oh God, people are going to hate me. You know, it's like people are going to hate us. But not knowing that the more people wanted something, you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So around about that time, we started doing Atlantis at the Sub Club with Harry. And it was it was a great community club. Oh, it still is a community club. And it was like a lot of the same people you would see from weekend. I mean, people came there every week, you know. It was like, you know, true meaning of a club. It was like, this was their space to come down, hang out, you know, and those were great times as well. But everything has ebbs and flows. Everything has a shelf life. So that was great for about 3 years. And then we were introduced to the Arches space, and we took that on. Which
talk a little bit about the difference between rave culture and acid house culture. This is something I talked about with Luke Slater, and I wasn't super aware of it. But the way he put it, he drew a pretty clear distinction actually, and was basically saying that he wasn't super into rave culture, and the acid house thing was more what he was. Yeah, okay. Talk about that a bit and how that was.
I can draw parallels between what's quoted as rave today and what rave had became. It became messy, sort of violence had started to creep back in. The music had started to get a bit uglier, a bit less refined. So it became quite crass musically.
Yeah.
Obvious kind of samples, and just musically it wasn't where
endless
our heads
piano
were at.
breakdowns, basically.
Yeah, just quite, artistically barren music that wasn't, exciting us in any way, just, it became bigger. The whole thing became much, much, much bigger. And it just became, the last place I would have wanted to be stood in was in a big hall or in a rave. And and interestingly, at that point, that's when they became legal. I think at the beginning, everybody was listening to the same soundtrack. Everybody would be listening to, Frankie Knuckles, Your Love, or, Strings Alive, or, like these records were, Kiara, Let Me Love You Tonight, Thread Kiss. All these records were kind of staple. Yep. I mean, when you think about that period, like that 2-3 year period during Acid House, the amount of amazing records that they made, you're just like, whoa. Every week you were like walking away from the record shop with a bundle of these records, which now have become like, it's become like disco. They've become classics. Yeah. So much to the point where if I hear them now, I'm like, oh, I can't listen to them anymore. They're just too, they're just too overused. But I think with the rave thing, it just became too pedestrian. In fact, without sounding like a snob, I mean, it just became something that was just, you had like a lot of pop kind of ravey stuff, that just, it just became commercial and not great musically. And when someone stops becoming a challenge like that, I kind of tend to just kind of move away from it,
Yeah. So, Luke also pointed to the less socially liberal aspects of rave culture as he saw it. Was that something that makes sense from your perspective too? I mean, I suppose just being mainstream, I suppose would hint at that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get we had, what kind of put us off this thing was that we had our capacity to do larger events grew and grew. So it got to the point where we were doing like Ingliston for like 15,000 people.
Really? Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, when you got that many people in a venue, it's, you're going to have to make some
I think it's called Slam 3D. But we did that, and then we were just like, nah, we could either keep doing this and sort of make a lot of money out of it, and then begin to, start to play music that we didn't like, or we could just turn our back on it. And that's what we did. We turned our back on it and just went into, doing a clubbier thing again.
Okay, just before we go on, like, can you describe one of those events? Like, for example, was it like 1 hour sets? Was it that sort of like rave thing? Like, who was playing? Like,
I think the Beloved played. I think, really? I think people like Adamski, like that kind of thing. When we did the Tramway, it was like Kevin Saunderson played.
Okay.
Hacienda guys played. We did one with Derek May. We did, so Detroit was in the mix of things at that point. Detroit was in the mix. That kind of thing. It was DJs and live acts.
Okay. And the live acts had tunes in the charts, presumably. Like at that point.
Sometimes not, but it was.
I mean, I've had Kevin Saunderson on the show and talked to him about Inner City. And I didn't realize how big they were. They were massive.
Oh yeah, they had like those. Yeah, he was like he was the pop guy. But I mean, for us, Kevin Saunderson was a massive influence. Kevin Saunderson back in the day, and I mean all those Detroit guys. Because it wasn't apparent to us how they were making the records, or like, because it just sounded so pure. their music sounded so pure. It sounded like they just switched the machines on and the machines were doing the work, or something was something was going on that we couldn't comprehend. So it was really intriguing to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Kevin was the one that, he was the one that had the mainstream success, right? I mean, obviously,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, but just simply look at the fact he was writing songs. You know, I don't think, you know, Carl, Craig, and, you know, Juan Atkins and Derek May. I mean, none of them were really song based. It was all instrumental based music. And I think Kevin was using, you know, well, it was his wife, Anne, wasn't it? So,
yeah, right.
They were, you know, it's interesting because it is a real fusion between Chicago music and techno, you know, like Detroit techno. You can really hear the Detroit elements and you can really hear the Chicago elements in it as well. But, you know, with pop sensibilities.
Yeah, I mean, you got a big chorus. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've never really been a fan of like, you know, big pop belters.
Yeah, fair enough. So, okay, so what was the club direction you took then as a result of feeling disillusioned?
Well, we just kind of went back
raised?
Just went back underground a little bit and just, you know, regrouped and went to, you know, it's not like we made some big statement or anything. It was just something that we chose to do. We just carried on doing the smaller events that we had been doing before those. You know, it was a crossroads. You know, it's like we could have either went that way, and then, but I was like, well, if I'm not feeling that, then I'm not going to do it. I mean, I think throughout our whole career, it's been based on that gut feeling. If we don't feel like we belong there, or we want to pursue that, or it becomes too much like something you have to do to, you know, primarily just do it for money, then it's probably the wrong decision. It's probably why we're still doing it now.
Right.
Yeah, you know.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You know, taking the short-term easy money is almost always the wrong decision, isn't it, really?
Yeah, long-term, I think it is.
Yeah.
Long-term.
Depends on how much the money is, I suppose. You know? Yeah. So tell me about getting into producing, because I was listening to the early stuff today. It seemed, going back and listening to it sort of in turn, it seemed like you had basically it all gets much better around 94. I think that was the kind of there's a kind of like definite step up. And then obviously Positive Education came out in 95, right? I believe it was.
Yeah.
Tell me about getting into production. Like, were you presumably starting from absolute zero, right? How did you, what was your first experience in the studio?
Well, we kind of just wanted to, again, there wasn't a lot of British DJs making records. And we just kind of thought, you know what, I kind of want to get in and said, like, and the guy we worked with at the time, Jim Mattooney, and Glenn Gibbons, who we run Soma with now, they had access to...
Oh, right, they still working with you guys. Wicked.
But Glenn is, they still had access to a studio, and they were like, do you want to come in and make some records? And we were like, yeah. So we would just go in and bring, you know, just play them records that we were playing and go like, and then we'd come up with the ideas and they would take our ideas different. They were like engineers at that point. We, you know, for the first couple of Positive Education was made that way, and most of the early tracks were made with engineers, you know, and then we just, around the mid-90s, we started making our own stuff, started getting a handle on it ourselves. But yeah, it was, that was the process that we worked with at the time. But that was, I mean, again, that just felt like a natural step to, you know, take from playing people's records to wanting to make them. I mean, I'd been in a band and stuff, you know, before.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, had you done much music at all before?
Yeah, I'd been in a couple of bands.
What did you play?
Not guitar, but nothing serious came of it. It wasn't like a thing, but it was natural for me to want to listen to the music and then kind of progress to making it, you know. So, that was the kind of that's where we were at with that. But it was, Yeah, I mean, like, I think we made probably one of our best records really early on, like with Positive Education, which became, which we kind
sometimes
of.
it's. I mean, I think that's not uncommon actually, because you
Yeah,
have that kind of like the kind of pureness of the vision is sometimes, well, it's quite often just there at the start, and you just kind of
Absolutely.
tap into it. As soon as the kind of technical stuff is there, it just happens. I think that's really common for artists actually. But Positive Education was a really big tune in the scene as well, though, as well as being just a great record. It was.
I mean, it just
very
surprised
successful.
us. I mean, I think with that one, when we it took about 20 minutes. Again, we were talking, like, circling back to what we were talking about earlier about how your favorite tracks come together really quickly. That one came together in about 20 minutes. And then we were like, wow, we had like the basic parts that were, but maybe the drums weren't all right, but in terms of the synth lines,
the riffs,
the bass line came later, and then strings came later. But that came together so quickly that we just knew that we were like, wow, that sounds.
This is good.
That's hit the money. And then it took us like 2 or 3 weeks of procrastination and kind of, like that's strings or that kind of, and it drove us fucking crazy. But I think that I'm really grateful for that procrastination and that time that we put in, because I've been listening back to it. I can't fault anything on the record. I can't go, that's too loud or that's too quiet or, anything like that. I mean, I certainly don't put that much. We certainly don't put that much effort into the music now. Like in terms of, if something sounds right, you kind of tend to feel it's right.
I mean, that comes with
away.
experience, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of that kind of tinkering is, because you just, when you don't have experience, you just like,
Yeah, there's not that much deliberation, anymore.
So, was it immediately well received when it came out?
Well, it was well received from people in Detroit and across the board. It kind of crossed over into other scenes as well. So other DJs would play it. That you wouldn't have thought would play. A techno record per se. So it did. It did. It was well received. And it sold a fair chunk of records. Richie Houghton was a big fan, and.
Yeah, he's a mix. There's a bunch of remixes, isn't there?
Kenny Larkin
from that time, yeah.
People like that, big fans. So yeah.
And who put it out? Did you put it out? Or?
We put it out. I think R&S tried to license it, but we didn't license it to them. We just put it out on our own label. Not quite early on in the label actually, but I think by this point we'd found proper distribution and. When we started Soma as a record label, it was another extension of the punk, post-punk thing, because like a lot of our favourite labels were like, growing up as kids, were like Factory Records or Postcard or things like that. So it seemed like a natural thing to do, was to just go and do, start an independent record label. And I mean, who else was going to put it out? There was no framework for that at the time. The dance music wasn't every. Some of it was released by majors. A lot of the stuff that we like was coming out in independent American labels. So it just made sense. It just made sense.
Yeah, I mean, you must have sold a bucket load of 12s then in that first year. Like, how many do you reckon? Go on, off the top of it, have a guess.
I don't know. 30,000 of Positive. I mean, records sold a lot more then.
Well, yeah.
Even a record sold 3,000. You know what I mean? It's like. Yeah, because you distributed them records like, oh, right, I'll take it. Record shops would be like, I'll take that. So, yeah, I mean, records didn't, I think music was better then because you had to commit to, there wasn't, there's still amazing music getting made now, but you've got to search to find it.
Yeah. And
back then, you had various filters in place. One of them being getting your records to commit a record to vinyl was a big filter. And then you had also great record shops that would, that people got to know your taste, and that was another filter. Did you miss some music from that? Of course, you would probably miss some things, but it's good to have filters in place. And I think
absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole kind of thing about gatekeeping, quote unquote gatekeeping.
Yeah.
In this instance, gatekeeping is absolutely good. It's absolutely positive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
It genuinely is, like, because otherwise it leads to what we have now, which is just an endless conveyor belt of kind of cookie cutter stuff, which has not had any quality control applied to it seemingly whatsoever, right? And then, it's just impossible to find the good stuff, basically, which is what we have now.
I mean, when I'm listening to music, it's like I'm kind of going through a record store. So if I kind of want to listen to, naturally, I just want to listen to it all. But if with a list of promos, there's some that I've got quite good at going, nah, just by seeing it, that won't be good, or like, no, that won't be good. You know what I mean? So there is a bit of a kind of filtering process, but it's important to have filters in place for sure. But I could go on all day listening to music. I've always got too much. Like my playlists, when I broke up to a club with a USB, I'm like, the other day, it was like, we can't, I got a notification on Rekordbox saying there's more than 1,000 tracks on that playlist. You can't, I'm like, oh God. So.
Yeah, right. So there's a 12 in your catalogue called Acid Break, which is basically a drum and bass tune. And it's really good. That was one of the ones I kind of like.
What's the artist? What's the artist?
Slam and Helix.
Oh God,
definitely you. I mean, it definitely is you. I've checked it. It's from '97.
Right. God, you're talking about things that I don't even remember.
It's like 2-track 12, Acid Break / Sikakis, yeah.
Oh.
And it's pretty great drum and bass type stuff with acid lines on top of it. It's really good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I must have made that one in my sleep because I can't. I'm struggling with that one. I'm not going to lie.
I was going to check what label it is. It's Stompin' Tunes.
I don't think it's us.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I thought it might not be, but then I looked and it seemed like it probably was. Anyway, that's good. I mean, that was going to be my question. Have you made much stuff other than techno? With that as an example, but maybe that's not even an example. So,
well, I guess contrary to what we've just talked about there about the new album being all kind of one thing, I think that's a recent development where we've kind of learned that patience and control to sort of be able to do that. But a lot of our earlier albums, like Head States, had like a kind of drum and bass kind of / drum and bass influence track on it. Can't remember the name of it now.
That's 96, isn't it? From that sort of time, yeah.
So so doing those albums where that was the environment where we could experiment, we could sort of genre hop and try different things out and experiment with different styles.
Has all the stuff been on Soma?
Most of it, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a weird one that. Yeah, I mean, we tend to just, we've done a lot of remixes for other artists on other labels, but it's our label and it's where we want to present ourselves as on our label. That makes sense to us. We've done a couple of things for radio. Did something on Radio Slave's label. Can't remember the name of it now. RMX or something.
The techno one.
We've done. We've just done a bunch of remixes for like Looks Later, Planetary Assault Systems, Dax J. We did a remix for him. Just various people. We just kind of, it's just finding the time. Normally, Darren will say to me, "Oh, by the way, you've got a single penciled in for September, and it's like August," and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I'll need to submit that." So it's just, it's hard enough just kind of focusing on getting 3 or 4 EPs a year and an album or whatever. So it's finding the time to get all that working and get that, it's time consuming as well as DJing and stuff. It's, listening to music and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's quite time consuming. So
absolutely. How did the label progress in terms of signing other stuff? Because I mean, there's been some really amazing music come out on Soma other than yours. So,
of course.
So you run it with Dave Clark, but not that Dave Clark, right?
Yeah, not that Dave Clark.
Which I always, whenever I'm reading about, I was like, Dave Clark, he's not. And then I realised that actually no, there is another Dave Clark. Who I've met loads of times. So.
I should say it's that Dave Clark because I know for a fact that annoys him, and I quite enjoy. I quite enjoy annoying techno Dave Clark. The other Dave Clark, but Dave's not as involved in it at the moment. So it's usually, it's me, Glenn, Ord, and a guy that works in the office, Darren. We're the main kind of nucleus of the label just now. We're pretty hands-on with that, choosing the releases, and we're up to 2 releases a month. So it's full on. So it's every week we're doing A&R for it, and we're coming up to our 35th anniversary next year.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's really scary. Yeah, but I mean, I think the most important thing for us is that the label stays current and relevant, and isn't something that kind of if we're going to celebrate the 35th anniversary, it'll be done in a contemporary way. We won't it won't be I remember this sort of fest.
Right.
We'll need to put a contemporary sort of slant on it.
Sure. How did it work in the early days? I mean, has it changed significantly at all along the way? Like, who were you putting out mostly early on, other than your own tunes?
Well, we're putting out Rejuvenation tracks, Glenn and Jim's own project. Felix the House Cat. I mean, it's Percy X, who's now Edit Select.
But how were you A&Ring that? Were people just sending you demos, or were you going out and actively...
Well, some of we put out some Surgeon's tracks, Tony.
Yeah, that was one of the first tunes I ever bought, actually.
Yeah.
The Mugger Scum Out
Well,
one.
I met Surgeon in a club in Birmingham. They booked me to come down and DJ House of God, I think it was called.
House of God, yeah, right.
Really early on. And this kid with the Tops Tony with a cassette in Glasgow goes like, "Here's some of my tunes, you might quite like them." And I was like, "Cool." And I think it was like all the downward stuff. And I took it back and I listened to it. And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." It's like Jeff Mills, but a little, like really consistent,
Yeah.
And so I think I might have had a phone number on the cassette, and I phoned Tony up and I said, "Do you want to make some tracks for Soma?" And he went, yeah, okay. And then, we send the data up a couple of weeks later. Awesome. So it's most of
but that's an amazing 12.
So a lot of it's coming into people's orbit, and a lot of it's kind of, just, people would send demos or people would call you. I would put out Felix the House Cat's like early records.
Because you have a mobile number on the label.
Well, he gave my number to other people in Chicago, so I would be I'd be lying in bed, like with the time difference and shit, and I'd be like, or whatever. I'd be lying in bed, and the phone would go and go, "Hey, it's Alexi Selvey from Chicago. Can I send you some tracks? That kind of thing." So it was a mixture of everything being connected and coming into people's orbit, and then people calling you, or sometimes if you like the person's music, you get in touch with them as well.
Yeah, right. Obviously, there was the Daft Punk release too. Which was notable, I suppose.
Well, I mean, their original music didn't really sound like what they went on to make. I mean, the first new wave EP, they played Does That in Paris in a flat in an apartment.
How did you meet them?
Well, I was introduced to them. I can't remember the guy's name now that introduced us. But he was like, "Yeah, these 2 young producers want to meet you." And I'm like, I think they're like 2 or 3 years younger than me, or maybe a bit more, I don't know. And they were just around for a couple of days, like, because we'd done this Euro Disney thing. We played in the techno arena with Sven Bath and a few others. And then we got back into Paris, and then we had a couple of days in Paris, and we were just walking about, and these two really quiet guys that were in the background, we never really spoke. And then they want to let you hear the music, and then we went up to someone's apartment, and then they put this like cassette on. It was like boom, 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 it's mad, kind of like almost industrial kind of sounding music. And we were like, wow,
right.
that it just sounded really different and really edgy and really different. You know, it was, I think Alive was on there. Basically, the EP, the first EP was on there, and we were like, I think we're like, right, okay, we're going to sign you. You know, like we'll sign you on the spot. Right. And then they made Daft Funk, and I was like, I don't like that track. So I'm kind of dubbed the worst A&R man in history because I nearly turned down Daft Funk. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't make sense to me when I first heard it either, actually. I mean, I remember reading about it in Mixmag, and like people going on about how amazing this tune was, and then hearing it and being like, but it's too slow. What is this? Well, because I was super into like the horror stuff at the time.
That's in many ways it's genius, because it had this kind of, people had to stop their set to play the track,
right?
Because everybody
which made it a moment in of itself. Right?
Everybody was playing at 1:30, 1:35 even. You know, then even if you were a house DJ, you were kind of playing 30 plus. You know. So that record was like, I don't know, 110 BPM or something. I don't know. But I heard Kevin Saunderson play it back to basics, and I just heard a tune of like when he stopped the record, and I just wow, you know, and I was like, all right, okay, I get it now. But even Richie Houghton was like, oh, I really like that record. And I'm like, really? I was like, I never thought you would love that, you know. But I've grown to love it, you know, by the way. But at the time, I was just I had a bit of a purist mentality, you know. I was like, oh, if it's not from Detroit or it doesn't sound like, you know, I've always been like, you know, back then I was a wee bit of a purist. So I kind of like, I was like, oh God, it sounds like a kid's theme or something, the bit at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, how wrong am I?
Yeah, well, like I said, I would have been the same. So, but that was their first release, right? The new Wave was the first release that had Alive and a few other tracks. I mean the Soma was their first releases. I mean,
Well, they were in a band called Darling before that, and the name Daft Punk came from a bad review they got in the NME. Someone going, you know, I don't like this. It sounds like Daft Punk, and they're like, okay, Daft Punk. I'm going to nick the name Daft Punk and use it.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And then they signed to Virgin, did they? Off the back of the second release?
we knew we were never going to keep them. I mean, I went to, you know, I knew because I'd met Thomas's dad a couple of times. You know, I'd go out there,
right? Because he was a famous disco producer. Yeah.
Wasn't he? We'd go out to Paris and sort of hang out with him occasionally, and we'd end up in this big 70s studio is where they made Astro de Gaulle kind of cartoons and stuff, and they'd be in there with Paul Johnson records and playing all the things, so a little crew of them. And then I met his dad, and you know, I'm like, "You like techno?" And he goes, "Yeah, I feel it." Yeah, you know, kind of like that. So, but his dad was really, really switched on in the music industry. His dad knew. I guess his dad, I think we tried to borrow the money to try and, you know, give them the bigger approach that they needed, but at that point it just wasn't possible. You know, and they basically effectively Virgin had to license the tracks off us for the first album. But they were very, you know, they did. It wasn't a sort of cue transition. They were very kind of, you know, respectful of the way that the whole transition was done.
Yeah, right. At what point did their live set acquire momentum? Because that was the other thing that was what they were talked about in the press was actually to a large extent, obviously the records, but like they were kind of regarded as this incredible live act from early on, weren't they? I remember seeing them a Glastonbury, I forget which one it was, in the sort of mid-90s. I was a teenager, and they were still had the the guitar pedals on stage and all that kind of stuff, and it was awesome, to be honest. But at what point did that become a part of it?
I think it was pretty natural for them to go down that route anyway, because they are musicians. They're not DJs. I mean, like, Thomas did a couple of DJ gigs with me, played in Dublin with me, did a couple of other gigs, but you could tell he wasn't really a DJ. And I think they agreed to come to play for us in the Arches on a Friday night and do this thing called the Daft Mix, which was kind of a fusion of live, and basically it was them DJing. They'd found a way to sample the music that they loved and mix it together in a kind of live performance. So they would be using a 909 and they would be doing it all live.
Right.
So that's the first time I saw them do it. And then they came back to the Renfrew Ferry. We used to do these parties at the Renfrew Ferry, which is on the Clyde in Glasgow. It's like a big like glass roofed bowl thing. Amazing venue. And we made a party with them in there. That was probably one of the first times that they'd ever performed a live show.
Yeah.
So I think it was, quite very early on in their career, they decided that they weren't going to be DJs, they were going to be a live act, and that was what they were more comfortable with.
Yeah,
I mean, it showed it's quite rudimentary what they use. I mean, he basically, when I went into Thomas's house, his studio was set up on his floor,
right,
and it was just a couple of, I think it was a RZ1 Casio RZ1 there. There was like
really, okay,
yes, great clap sound on the RZ1, great hi hats on the RZ1. But yeah, it's got a little sample pad on it. Very rudimentary. And then a ghetto blaster. I was like, "Where's the speakers?" He goes, "That's the speakers." I goes, "Really?" I goes, "If it sounds good on this, it sounds good on anything." Like, well, okay, I got you. I hear you.
Right.
So
yeah.
Okay. Cool. I mean, it was just like, obviously, when they came to mix down their singles, they weren't using that setup. But I think for them, it was important to have something that they could just jam with and have fun with, which I think's, good things always come when you're comfortable and you're having fun.
Totally. Are they gonna reform, do you reckon, at any point?
I'm not privy to that information.
What's your gut feeling?
Well, nobody thought Oasis were going to reform.
Right.
I don't know. I guess money talks. Money talks. Every time. I think, if they get offered the right money, I think they'll come back. Wish I was on some sort of share of that money, but it's not. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Stuart, this has been great. Let me ask you a couple. Yeah, let me ask you at least one to finish. What's in your opinion, the best club in the world?
I'm going to say Berghain.
Okay, that's a solid choice, and a choice that I would probably agree with, to be honest.
But,
so,
I'm only saying that because it's a club that we've played many, many times, and it's the club that still gives me challenges and makes me nervous and keeps me on my toes. And it's, actually the last few times we've been playing live in there, and it's been amazing. They've got the sound system in there. They've got this big black box thing over the dance floor, and the sound is just out of this world in there. And the music just sounded immense on it. But I think in terms of, it's more than just the musical soundtrack with Berghain. It's the fact that you're always going to have an interesting night in there socially as well. You're always going to meet interests in people because it has a really tight door policy. There's people are going to leave you alone inside. There's not any guy with a yellow jacket coming up and saying, hey, but like do this, it's just very free feeling. I think for that freedom and for the sound system and the attention to detail that they have in Berghain, I would have to say that that's still number one for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to put you on the spot massively. I asked this to someone on a podcast yesterday, and they had to try and check their phone. What is actually, no, how can I rephrase that so it's a bit less bad? Name a couple of tunes that are going to be big this summer or are big this summer in your set. New tunes, I mean.
Why is that a bad question?
I don't know. Well, basically, being put on the spot is often tough in this kind of respect.
I never think about records these days as individual.
That's why it's a bad question. No one does.
Component. To me, it's just, I think DJing is kind of different now for me, that I don't think about individual tracks. It's probably the one that we made like yesterday, or, as I said earlier, I've kind of, sometimes something will come into my head, like an older track, and I go, I couldn't play that now in its original form, but I'll rework it, or I'll just muck around with the parts in Ableton. I'll make a version of it. People will recognize it, but it'll be very different. So it's usually like, an edit of something that, like the last one I did was Adonis No Way Back, but doesn't sound, but it's kind of a techno version of Adonis No Way Back, but it sounds terrible, but it really works,
Okay.
So,
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Also, thanks a lot for coming on the show, Stuart. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, mate.
Music, not diving, with Scuba.